It's very rare in one's life that you meet somebody who is completely different from most people you've ever met before. Lulu, Lucien Ferrenbach is his proper name, is a Frenchman who's traveled all over the world and whom I happened to meet in Bocas del Toro, a remote coral reef archipelago in the western part of Panama. I went over to talk to him, and he was in the process of finding a house to live in Bocas, because he wanted to build himself an ocean-going vessel so that he could continue sailing around the world. I suddenly realized that I was in the presence of a very special man. It's because he has a series of very special characteristics. First of all, he's completely his own person. He lives according to what he wants to do. He goes where he wants to go, when he wants to go there. He, years ago, ran away from the only sort of self-employed job he had, which was to make ironwork for people in France. And he got sick of very spoiled, very wealthy people continually telling him to make things differently to the way he'd made them.
I don't like be in a box, or I don't like to be, if I cannot do what I want, I do it not.
So he decided to take off and live his own life anywhere in the world that he wanted to. So Lulu is a tremendous sailor. He has sailed single-handedly with his wife across the Atlantic. He sailed throughout the Caribbean, throughout the Mediterranean, down to West Africa, up to the Orkneys north of England, and even up to Vancouver and British Columbia in Canada. He's a ship designer, and he's a carpenter and fiberglass maker and metal worker and architect, and put all that together and you can build a 40-foot ocean-going vessel. Now he's living in a wooden shed on stilts over the water, through which you can see the sea underneath. The toilet is a hole on a pedestal. I would bring ministers of government, senators from the United States, the secretary of the Smithsonian, the French chargé d'affaires from the embassy. So Lulu, in order to make it a special occasion, gets a 4x8 sheet of plywood and places it over his small table and throws a bed sheet over that. I bring a little wine and a little cheese, which he cannot buy in that outfit, but he will make poulet haïtien mixed with beautiful dessert with fresh croissant, and the minister or the senator will not be able to believe his eyes or his stomach when he sits down to this royal meal in this shack, which back in Paris or in London, he wouldn't even park his car. And those are often the most memorable experiences those men and women who visit had for their whole trip to Panama, is the dinner with Lulu and his wife Bibi. So he's a raconteur. He has incredible stories from his trips around the world, from his experiences with other people. He's now returning to another thing that he was, when he was younger, very famous for, which was sculpting in iron. He is what is known as an artist blacksmith. Before Lulu embarked on his voyages and his life in the New World, he had already come to fame in France and elsewhere in Europe as a young sculptor in iron, an artist blacksmith. He profited from state-funded commissions for ecclesiastical and monumental restoration that was then available to repair the terrible damage to the artistic patrimony of France after the Second World War. His works can be seen in many towns and villages of Alsace and Lorraine, the region around his native city of Strasbourg. Later, he won acclaim and national and international prizes for his more abstract sculpture. He also owned 3 studio workshops, ateliers in French, throughout France, where he made his living doing commercial ironwork to decorate private homes, mansions, and other public buildings. In 1972, he gave all this up, refitted a 65-foot ship, and sailed around the world for nearly 20 years, until he settled in a remote archipelago called Bocas del Toro in Panama in 1990. Lulu's family has long worked with iron. His ancestors were armourers to King Louis XV of France. But like many Europeans, they suffered from major wars, and Lulu was no exception. His early life in France was afflicted by the rise of Nazism in the 1930s and the occupation of France by the Germans in the Second World War.
My grandfather was a sculptor in Stein. And then in a depression, we had a depression like in the States, and there was no work to do. Then all the family go to Germany, and they're building a casino in Baden-Baden. But the casino was a replica from the Trianon in Versailles. So there was a lot of stone sculpture and stone work to do. And this was before the Nazis start. And then I go every school holiday to see my grandfather and my grandmother. And one day, it was in '34, when the brown shirt go in the street, and my grandfather had a beret, a French beret, you know, he was French. And he said to me, come on, we go a little bit for a walk. And then this brown shirt pass, and one step out hit my grandfather and put his beret on the ground and stamped it with his feet. And when you are 7 or 8 years old, that's, you know. And there was a demarcation line. Half France was occupied and half France was not occupied. But the train had to go through the unoccupied and then in occupied. When we came into occupied, there was a big band, you know, boom, 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 this German music, and you had to raise your hand, and you raise not your hand, the guy come behind and kick you. That was the start. I was still in art school, and you know, in art school you have a lot of fancy ideas, and we was against the regime, so we draw French flag, and we put them in a night in the street, and we done other stupid stuff, and we was caught, you know. So I had 6 weeks, what I call police station arrest. That means they beat you up every morning and every evening, 25 lash, with a garden hose full of sand. One day I was not, you know, it's painful, and you know the time coming in the morning and the time in the evening. So I was not, I was against, and so they caught me, and I had like to hear, you know, and they opened out with a plier. That's, I don't like the German.
Still a teenager after the war, Lulu became a budding star racing cyclist, a major professional sport in France. But his career was cut short by a serious accident that left him paralyzed.
I tried to live the lifestyle we live now. That was from this. You know, when you lay in a bed and the doctor say to you, maybe you can walk one day. That's terrible, you know, when you was 20, 22 years old. It's scaring. So, but in my mind I said, no, I will walk. And the accident was a stupid accident. All accidents are stupid. And I was in a first lead, and it was downhill in the Alp, and we passed through a small village with people right and left on the street, and there was a dog. Instead letting the dog be where he wants, the people chased him, and so the dog go from one right and left, and I hit the dog, and I start to fly, and I break my neck. And then I was completely paralyzed for about 11 months. And in one night, it comes back on the left side, but on the right side it took more. Then little by little, you know, what was from the brain to the extremity, there was no impulse and no command. I had to do something and never give up. You know, it's...
In Lulu's early post-war career, he felt the need to commemorate the dead, especially those who suffered genocide. One of Lulu's most celebrated works at this time is a single monument to Jews, Catholics and Mennonites who had suffered in France from the savagery of the Nazis.
Catholic priest, he was decapitated with an axe, cut the head. And there was a Mennonite priest, he was hanged. And Jew, it was a rabbin, he was gassed in one of his gas chamber. I know the families before, you know. There was a big axe hanging with a kind of half round and half semicircle steel forms, like, you know, you see and you hear the from the axe when we go down. For the Mennonite priest, there was a loop with an open loop. For the Jewish, it was a candle holder with 7 candles. The gas chamber, it's a box with hole and 2 enormous hands coming out, the last spasm from their life, you know, before they die.
Lulu's artistic sculpture won him widespread acclaim and led to a very successful commercial application. However, the commercial side became so frantic and frustrating, keeping up with the demands of wealthy clients, that he eventually gave it all up for a completely different life, one involved only with ships and seafaring.
In Brittany, I find a sunken boat in this outside the harbor, so I raised the boat. So when the boat was finished, I think, why I go not fishing? You know, it was easy money, and scallops fishing was very high on this time, so I go fishing when the boat was restored. You fish only in the winter. And in the winter, the channel, it's very, very scaring. So I convert the boat from fishing boat for traveling after. In the meantime, when I was not fishing, I was working in a shipyard, building fishing boat in wood. That was very nice, you know. It's also a different kind of work. It's not carpentry. A boat, it's not a house. It's completely different and have a different shape, and it's nice. It's like a little bit a sculpture.
It's a sculpture.
Yeah, it's a sculpture. And it was very interesting for me to learn. In a boat, nothing is straight. It's not a 90 degree angle. Everything is open or closed or against or curved or counter-curved, you know. So it was interesting.
Lulu split his time between fishing and chartering groups for cruises in the Mediterranean. While cruising in the Greek islands, he met a bohemian young Frenchwoman, Beatrice Bernard, Bibi, who was to become his mate, both as a wife and a sailor.
I was very young. I mean, we got 28 years, you know, difference. But I think he was, for me, the kind of person who felt like I was very, you know, close to my father and my grandfather. And I think he was kind of, you know, the image of my father. And I could talk to him, and so that's it. You know, I was kind of the black sheep of the family. I had to tell my mother, you know, what I was doing. So my mother, who is kind of a snob or something like this, she just say, you know, to all her friends and all my family, well, she's an hostess on a yacht. And honestly, it was not a yacht, it was a fishing boat. So I told her I was getting married. And she told all her friends I was getting married with the owner of the yacht. So what Lulu really attracted me, first it was his smile. He got a beautiful smile. And starting to talk with him, you know, he was kind of talking to somebody, like I was talking to an encyclopedia. I say, wow, that's a kind of person you meet only once in your life. Because I was ready to go all over the world. I wanted, to do everything, and he was ready to do everything. And I think, that's one of the things who attract me, and basically his nice smile.
Humor in the face of what many of us would consider extraordinary insecurities or extraordinary uncertainties in his life. Lulu laughs at them. Lulu enjoys the fact that he was stuck on an island and had no food and had to scrape limpets off the rocks to eat. And then he'll laugh. Oh, then I did a watercolor.
When we used to travel, we had no money, no pension, nothing. I mean, we just live from watercolor to the other watercolor.
If you have Lulu as a friend, you have him. It's like a brother. It's like a relative. There's a chemistry that is remarkable. I think he makes us all think about why we're alive. He makes us all think about what is important to us. Why do we do what we do, and perhaps shouldn't we be doing more of what we really love to do? What Lulu meant to me is, you cannot, if I'm employed for $1 million a year to do something I do not like, and I have 3-week or a month's vacation where I can do anything I want, is it really worth 11 months of my life to earn that money so as to have 1 month off? Whereas Lulu shows me that if you take the risk to not be sure where that money is coming from, you can have 12 months of satisfaction, of pleasure, of fun, of meeting people, of doing the things that you love to do. You just have to risk the uncertainty. You have to be confident in yourself that wherever you are and whoever you meet, you can not only cope with the situation, but you can profit, you can prosper in that situation.
You arrive in Manzanillo, where is this place, where is rocks on this side, rocks on this side, and Lulu came up and he said, no more fuel. So we had to put, the sail, but the wind was so strong. I mean, it was kind of, I could see the rock coming, and I say, okay, that's it. And Lulu is trying to put the sail smaller, to change the boat, but it was no way, Then I went down below and I heard, water coming in. And I just, opened one of the wardrobe and it was, like water coming in on the boat. And I think that was the only time I started crying. I went up and I said, Lulu, we are sinking now. And he said, no problem. He, just he went to look and the water was coming, and he took a piece of wood, shaped it, and he went, on. And he just stopped the leak, and he said, now can we have dinner?
So not only taking responsibility, but sort of enjoying it, laughing at it, making life and its satisfaction more important than anxiety over some future danger and security at all costs. And for many of us, those costs are at the expense of us enjoying our life.
For Lulu, I mean, his art is something, is a genius. Because he don't have to think of drawing or it just come to him. He's so sure of himself. He say, you know, okay, you know, what I'm doing is good. I sit at the table and I say, can you draw me, you know, something? Because he just sit there and he just go like this, you know.
Sometimes I do nothing for 2 or 3 months. Exactly, nothing, you know, only drawing and a little bit watercolor, but no steel work. I was fed up, you know. And then in the night, or sometimes sitting in outside, there's it.
He is still a formidable example to dare to follow. So I find myself now, having retired, having found late in my life this extraordinary person, this wonderful friend, this person who's now a member of my family. I have this opportunity because he had left the boat that he constructed in Panama when he came to live with me in West Virginia. So we, on sort of a whim, when wondering what to do with the boat, said, well, why don't we sail it back? And it seemed to me a perfect example, or perfect limited but real moment to experience being Lulu, as Lulu has been all his life, to take the risk to get on this boat. I've never sailed before. I don't know. He built the boat. I am assuming it's a good boat, that it'll take the weather. I don't know quite how, you know, what we eat. I can't cook. We're not sure where we're going to go to get gasoline, and we're not even quite sure what route. We don't know the weather. It's a wonderful adventure for me that will see Lulu in the way that he's been for much of his life. It'll enable me to see him in a context that I otherwise would never be able to experience. When we got there, Lulu immediately attacked the problem of building the winches and the various other pieces of gear that he had prefabricated back in the United States, and working with 2 Panamanian assistants, he was able to produce an array of equipment that would allow the ship to sail and navigate its way all the way up to the United States. The fact that he could do the metal work, that he could do the carpentry, that he could do the fiberglass is a tribute to the remarkable skills of Lulu that lie beyond just being a marvelous sculptor and an extraordinary aquaculturist. He is able to turn his talents to almost any aspect of manual skills. While I was doing my field work, there came the day that Lulu was going to have to go out to the Lubi, to the ship that had been standing there for 4 years without any maintenance while he was renewing his life in West Virginia. And I knew this was going to be a dramatic moment because we were not sure how much damage there was. Was there any damage to the hull? Was there any damage to the deck and the superstructure, and in short, how viable would it be for us to repair this ship in time for us to be able to sail it all the way up to North America. This was going to be a nostalgic and a dramatic moment for Lulu, and I was anxious to find out what the results would be.
And I put all the piece out.
Yeah.
As it turned out, there was good news and there was bad news. The main hull of the ship was in extraordinary condition. There was not one drop of water in the bottom of the ship, which after standing alone without maintenance for 4 years is in itself a tribute to the remarkable craftsmanship of Lulu, who of course had built the entire hull by hand on the land adjacent to where it was now sailing. However, the upper structure, the upper part of the wheelhouse had suffered very serious damage.
You have to put one from here.
It was galling for
Otherwise we
Lulu
cannot
to
roll out
go
the
and
boat.
see the
It's too-
extent of the damage when 4 years previously, having finished the construction of the ship, it was all in a perfect state. However, he doesn't dwell on the problems very long and quickly decided that this was a repairable ship and that this was a doable job in the 4 or 5 weeks that we had available, and he began to attack the repairs in his usual determined and systematic way.
So now they're gone. So that's, the start of the trip. And they just got a problem with the engine. They can't go backwards. So when they arrive in the harbor and they got to go backwards, one of the sailor, that's mean Rodrigo or Tony, got to go down in the engine and put backwards. So now I'm getting nervous because they're going to be in sea. So that's the most dangerous part of the trip.
But there was a storm about 3 days, very hard storm and very, very strong wind and big waves, very high sea. But Tony and I, we know this country, we know this area very good. So we were full of confidence and we left.
We both argued that if we're going to go all the way from Panama to Chesapeake Bay, we can't stop for a bit of bad weather.
We was full of hope, everything was fine.
The boat handled extremely well through a very rough passage that it takes to get out from the little island, the little isthmus where we were, and out into the open sea. And we were chugging along fine.
And after about 4.5 hours, we had a lot of seagrass.
I was looking at the GPS and engine sounded perfect, but we just went slower and slower until we stopped. Then we were beginning to get worried. So we decided to put down the anchor, and we put down an anchor on a great big chain.
The link was a 1/2-inch link, and it break like a butcher string.
But then we were worried, and we radioed for help. Lulu got on the radio. We got out the other anchor, and also on a great big chain, and put that down. And then the line would tighten, the wind would blow us tight, and then the next great wave would just be irresistible and push this boat.
And every time it hits a boat, it was...
And it would just snap the chain again. And each time we are closer to the coast. We started off probably a mile or two away when we were sailing. By now we're a couple of 300 yards. Now Lulu, being the experienced captain he was, we even had a third anchor with a huge rope. And I went scuttling down below decks, found it, brought it up, we attached it to this great big rope, and we dropped the third anchor. Not many people carry 3 anchors on a boat. And this anchor held, and the rope would stretch thin and then hold, and then stretch and then hold.
The load on a line was tremendous. And then I turned it, and there was from 3 strands, there was 1/2, and I said to Tony, the next time, and the next time, it breaks.
We were by this time 40-ish yards, wouldn't you say, Lulu, from the first great breaker?
Yeah. We was hit by a big breaker, and we put the mast in the water.
And Lulu disappeared behind the wheelhouse. And when I get round the back of the wheelhouse, Lulu is on his back with his foot hooked underneath the cable that joins the wheel to the rudder. The trouble is, he's trying to say something to me and nothing is coming out. It's as if he's suddenly contracted total laryngitis. And the reason for that is that the boat turned over so quickly, the rail came up and hit him in the throat. See, as the boat turned over, he stayed relatively vertical and the boat actually went horizontal. So the railing hit him in the throat.
And then we passed one breaker, second breaker, about 7, 8 breakers, and then we was on the beach.
When I received the phone call, from Tony, and the things I thought, I said, wow, are you back, are you in Cologne, And he said to me, no, I mean, it's a bad things happen, and Lubi is sunk, and, and Lulu is on the beach. I just came back, and I'm kind of, saying, I mean, what's going on? And he said, well, I mean, the boat is gone, and, and I say, well, just tell Lulu I love him, I love him, I love him.
We had bruises on muscles we didn't know we had. I mean, Lulu and I, the next couple of days, we could hardly move because running around, hauling on anchor ropes and doing all the things you do when you're in a dramatic situation like that, adrenaline is flowing like crazy. Neither of us are spring chickens. As Lulu says to me in French, we're no longer 20, Tony. And so we could hardly walk. We had pains and aches and bruises and cuts in every part of our body. But basically, we were uninjured.
I knew he was still alive. I knew we lost everything. But,
A boat we built for 6, 7 years. And that's it.
About 15 minutes later, the rescue boat from the Smithsonian arrived. 2 young scientists and 2 of the older administrative staff. The 2 young scientists had come in wetsuits, prepared, and they dived in and swam under the surf and came running down the beach towards us, I think expecting to find 2 dead old codgers, or 2 very seriously injured old codgers. But we were there. My main job was trying to pull Lulu away from the vessel. He kept going up to the vessel and trying to get on it or see what was the matter with it. And the trouble with is the vessel has a keel of about 2 feet, and it would be struck by the wave and keeled over like that. Then when the wave went back out to sea, the boat would come back over it. So the boat was going like this all the time, and the corner of the hull would come crashing down on the beach, and Lulu standing there with his toes about a foot from that, and oblivious apparently. So eventually I literally had to haul him back up the beach, screaming at him to stay away from the boat.
I told Tony when we was in a channel, I said to Tony, you see, it's not rough, but for a reason or other, if it's a sea, you can lose a boat in 5 minutes. And we lose it in 5 minutes.
A young Indian boy came by on a horse. They have very small horses in Central America. So I commandeered him I told him the situation. I told him I'd pay him a handsome fee if he would render us his services and come back with us. And after a little while, he agreed. And so in the end, Lulu stayed with one of the young scientists, camped by the ship, because he said if we leave, the vessel becomes international salvage. He's still thinking about towing the damn thing off the shore. And I try to walk out because we're so isolated where we shipwrecked that it was at least about a 3.5 to 4 hour walk to get out to any point where a boat could come ashore and pick us up. I gave him very strict orders to pick Lulu up and put him on a horse because Lulu, as you know, has a gamby leg and he can't walk very far. He hates to walk anyway. And so I waited at the other end of the walk, and all the Indians came out and the 2 horses came out, and then hour went by, 2 hours went by, it started to get dark, and then slowly I saw these two figures appear at the far end of the beach and walk towards me, and I started to walk towards them, and it's Lulu limping at about 1.5 miles an hour. Bodo carrying everything that both of them had been carrying, and I I just lit into Lulu. I said, why the hell didn't you get on a horse and come out? And he said to me, no seaman would be seen dead riding on the back of a horse, he said. And that's why he wouldn't get on the horse.
Yeah. It's the first time I cannot finish a project. It's the first time in my life.
I think it's our life. I mean, you know, the boat is our life. I mean, to just, you know, go. I mean, can you imagine? No, I mean, you can imagine. Just pull up an anchor and just, you know, go maybe, you know, a mile, and it's another bay, you know, and it just, that's, you know, it's free. I mean, freedom.
Lulu and Bibi have lived for 20-something years on a ship and sailed all around the world, and they need a ship like most of us need a car. We decided we weren't going to sail around the world anymore, but Lulu and Bibi would love to have a boat they could sleep on and maybe enjoy Chesapeake Bay and parts of the East Coast, maybe even go south to Florida for the winter. We were a little bit disappointed at what it is that we could get for the small amount of money that we were prepared to pay. We had one last thing to look at, which was in St. Petersburg. And we looked at it, and it was a very elegant yacht, a 30-foot Lancer, in other words, 5 or 6 feet longer than any we've seen before, in impeccable condition on the outside, a certain amount of fixing up cosmetically on the inside, a perfectly functioning engine, inboard. It's missing one sail, but other than that, and it had been on sale for much. Started off at $17 and come down to about $11,000. So I said to this gentleman, who, by the way, seemed much less aggressive than any other owner we'd talked to before, and I tried to tell him about the shipwreck and that Lulu and Bibi didn't have very much money, and that this was really beyond what we could manage, and so he said to me very slowly, well, do you think they could manage 5? And I took out my credit card and I gave it to him, and I said, yes.
Life, it's different for different people, but you have people that give up, and I never give up.
What a trip this has been to bring the boat back. The same thing happened on this trip as happened on the previous trip. The transmission blew up. And so only on this trip we had a spare engine, but it's a 9.9 horsepower outboard kicker. We brought this boat 1,100 miles, and it has no reverse.
You know, I was a cook on the boat. I have nothing to say, you know. He was a captain, and I was under his command, you know.